You wake up Tuesday morning and your girlfriend isn't in bed. Your phone buzzes. A text from her, but also from someone else's girlfriend. They're together. Intentionally. And you agreed to this. Most people would call that the end. But what if it was the beginning of something neither of you expected? This is the story of what happens when four people, all in committed relationships, all supposedly secure, decide to spend 7 days with someone else's partner. Not in the way your brain is probably going right now. Something stranger happened. Something that broke almost everything these couples thought they knew about jealousy, desire, and what actually holds a relationship together. Let me back up. Last month, I met two couples at a dinner party in Brooklyn. They weren't celebrities or influencers. They were normal. A graphic designer and a therapist, married 8 years. A software engineer and a yoga instructor, together for 5. Over wine, someone made a joke about how long-term relationships feel like you're dating the same person after a certain point. The conversation spiraled. One of them said something that stuck. What if the problem isn't that we're bored with our partner? What if we're bored with ourselves? By the end of the night, they'd made a bet. 1 week, they'd swap partners completely. Same apartment, same routines, same rules, but different people. Not sexual. That was the line they drew. No kissing, no crossing physical boundaries. Just living as if you were dating someone else. Cooking breakfast for a different person. Having conversations at 2 a.m. with someone who doesn't know your family drama. Going to their favorite restaurant with someone who hasn't been there 100 times before. Here's where it gets interesting. They set it up like a real relationship. They had to show up. They had to be on. No coasting, no Netflix silence on the couch. Because you've already seen the show together. You have to actually talk, actually be present, because this is brand new and the other person is watching how you move, how you listen, what you care about. The first 2 days were exactly what you'd expect. Awkward. Everyone was performing the best version of themselves. One of the men, let's call him David, spent the entire first evening asking questions about his temporary partner's job. Asking real questions. The kind he'd stopped asking his own wife years ago. She noticed. She told her actual boyfriend that night. He asked about the thing I never talk about. The thing I've wanted to tell someone about for months. That detail matters. And here's why. In long-term relationships, we don't become boring to our partners. We become invisible to them. They've already filed us away. They know the shape of us, so they stop looking. The person you're with stops being surprising, which feels like they stop being interesting, which feels like you stop being interesting. But you're not the same person you were when you met. You've changed 100 times. They just haven't looked in a while. By day 3, something shifted. One of the women, married 8 years, found herself sitting on the couch with her temporary partner, and he asked her about a scar on her shoulder. She'd never mentioned it to anyone. It was from a rock-climbing accident in college before she met her husband. This man didn't know the version of her that came after. He only knew the version of her that was unfolding right now, moment by moment. She started crying. Not because she missed her husband, because she'd forgotten what it felt like to be discovered. But here's the invisible cost nobody talks about. You start to wonder if your actual partner is discovering someone else. Day 4. The jealousy wasn't about the possibility of infidelity. It was about irrelevance. One of the husbands said later, "I was sitting at home, and I realized my wife was probably laughing with him right now. Not the polite laugh she gives me when I make a joke at dinner. The real laugh. The one that comes from being genuinely surprised by someone." That's the trap. You realize your partner might be having the best time of their week without you. By day 5, they'd all agreed. They needed to talk about it. So they did. All four. In a living room in Brooklyn, 3 days before the week ended. What happened next is the thing nobody sees coming. They didn't want to stop. Not in the way you'd think. They didn't want to keep swapping partners, but they wanted to go back to their real partners, armed with what they'd learned, because they'd all become aware of something. You don't fall out of love because the other person changed. You fall out of love because you stopped changing in front of them. You became a static object, a role, the husband, the girlfriend, a set of predictable behaviors that require no interpretation, no curiosity, no seeing. The couples didn't swap again, but they restructured their entire relationships on one principle. They had to stay the version of themselves that would be interesting to a stranger. That meant date nights became sacred, not rote. It meant conversations couldn't be on autopilot. It meant vulnerability had to keep happening, not just in year 2, but in year 8, year 10, year 15. Here's the deeper layer. And this is what makes the story actually useful. Modern relationships fail because we've been taught that love means comfort. That the goal is to reach a point where you can be boring together. And that's the definition of security. It isn't. Comfort is the death of attention. And attention is what relationships actually run on. The week ended. They went back to their actual partners. One of them said the reunion felt like a first date again, except with 8 years of history and inside jokes underneath it. That night, sex felt different. Not because they'd been apart, but because they'd remembered how to look at the person they were with. But there's something darker underneath all of this that nobody wants to admit. The experiment worked, which means it exposed something terrifying. It means that the person you're with right now could be having the time of their life with someone else, and you'd never know until you weren't there anymore. It means that the only thing keeping your relationship alive is the constant, exhausting act of not taking each other for granted. There's no autopilot. There's no finish line. There's no moment where you can finally relax and let the relationship coast. Some couples would call that a nightmare. Others would call it the whole point. The question they all faced, and the question you face now if you're in a long-term relationship, is whether you're still choosing your partner every single day, or whether you're just staying because it would be harder to leave. Whether you're with someone, or just alongside them. The couples from that week didn't solve anything. They just became painfully aware that love is a verb, not a noun. That the person you're with is only as alive as the attention you give them. That you can wake up next to someone for a decade and still be a stranger to them. Or you can wake up next to them and see them like you just met. The swap worked because it was a mirror, not a solution. Your relationship isn't failing because your partner is boring. It's failing because you stopped being curious. Remember, connect with yourself and others. Reflect on your experiences and choices. Repeat the process, because growth is not a destination. It's a way of living. Subscribe and join a community of curious minds seeking wisdom, purpose, and a more meaningful life. Think deeply. Live intentionally. Grow continually.